Well, hello and welcome to this tutorial on sheet music. So this thing here is called a stave. A note is the event of pressing a key. It's also a blob on the page. Pitch, well, pitch is simply the highness or lowness of a sound. The beat is simply the pulse that everybody hears, everybody dances to or claps to. And the rhythm is the pattern of the notes according to their temporal pattern, how they sound in time, or if you were to clap, that's a rhythm as distinct from the pitch. But having said that, pitch and rhythm is actually all there is to it. That's all that sheet music tells you. Sheet music tells you which keys do I play and when do I play them. So rhythm's all about the timing of notes, the duration of notes. If you like, it's when to press a key and also when to release a key. A bar is the repeating pattern, and in nearly all the music that I play, there are 4 beats in each bar. And this is the basic framework on which the whole of the music hangs. Taking 4 beats in the bar, it used to be the case that the emphasis was on the first beat with a little bit of emphasis on the third beat. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Generally, though, these days, we don't put the emphasis on the first beat. We put the emphasis on the second beat and on the fourth beat, such as this. Okay, so you get the idea. So let's start digging into what's happening with these beats. Well, single beats are represented by crotchets, so that's a crotchet there. So it's just the simple stick with a coloured in blob, and that's worth 1 beat. We have others which are worth 2 beats, so such as this one here. So that's called a minim. It's worth 2 beats, and the blob is not coloured in on it. We have quavers, and so if we look here, we can see that the sticks are now joined together. So that means they're quavers, and sometimes we join them in 2s, sometimes we join them in 4s, or sometimes they stand alone, such as here, in which case they have their own little tail on them. And we also have semiquavers. So here's an example of some semiquavers. So these extra little tails on the top indicate that they're worth 1/4 of a beat. Okay, so let's look at tied notes. Why do we need tied notes? Well, you can't represent everything you want to play just with minims, crotchets, quavers, and semiquavers. Sometimes you have a note that straddles a bar line, such as here. So what the slur, what this line between these 2 notes means is don't play the second note, but do count its time. And it isn't always the case that you want to tie 2 notes across a bar line. Sometimes you just tie 2 notes together. So here we've got 2 quavers. So you might ask, well, why don't you use a crotchet there? The reason is that crotchets occur on the beat. But if you put a crotchet there, it wouldn't be on the beat. So rather than confuse everybody by sprinkling quavers and crotchets everywhere, we use crotchets on the beat, and we tie notes together to indicate, so you can tell that this second quaver, even though we don't play it, is on the beat. Dotted notes. Why do we need dotted notes? Well, without dotted notes, you've got the options of crotchets and quavers, but sometimes you want to skew a rhythm. So instead of it going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You might want it to go 1, 1, 1, 1, like that. Okay, so if we look down here, we can see we've got a series of dotted notes. So we've got dotted crotchets followed by quavers. So we're going... So that's part of the sultans of swing. So yeah, a dotted note, adding a dot after a note lengthens it by 50% of its value. And what you typically do, so let me show you. So instead of having, where are we? So instead of having straight crotchets like that, what you can do is say, I'm going to put a dot after the first one, and then I'm going to halve the length of the second one, and that's how we keep the balance of time. As we can see, minims, crotchets, quavers, semiquavers, they all split exactly in half. But sometimes you don't want to split exactly in half. Sometimes you want to split into thirds, and that's where triplets come in. And if we look here, we can see that there's a 3 in a bracket above two groups of 3 notes. What this means is shove 3 notes in the space of 2. And I'm sure if you know Dancing Queen, you'll know this bit. Here's the triplets. More triplets. So, and then back to 4 beats in the bar. So that's an example of triplets. Rests. What are rests? Why do we need rests? Well, rest means don't play anything. But if we didn't have rests, it wouldn't be possible to figure out what's happening with the timing in the rest of the bar. You wouldn't be able to keep counting and figure out where subsequent notes were supposed to come in. So this one here, this squiggly line, that's the symbol for a crotchet rest. And this one here, this is a symbol for a quaver rest. But rests are just spaces. They're necessary spaces so that the timing adds up to a full set of 4 beats within the bar. So to summarize rhythm, there's normally 4 beats in every bar. We have crotchets, minims, quavers and semiquavers that account for single beats, 2 beats, half a beat, a quarter of a beat, respectively. We have triplets, where we go ahead and crush 3 notes into the space of 2. We have rests, which are really just place markers, padding, so that we can keep the timing right. We use a slur to tie 2 notes together, such as there. And we put a dot whenever we want to lengthen a note's time value by 50%. And we use grace notes on the occasions when we want to shove a few extra notes in and steal a little bit of time from the previous note. A stave. What is a stave? Well, yes, it's these 5 parallel horizontal lines. For piano, we depend on having 2 staves to give us a bit more range. We put blobs on the lines. So let's look here. So yes, we put blobs on the spaces and on the lines. Sometimes the range isn't enough, in which case then we need to add ledger lines. So I think it's obvious what they are, but it's these extra little lines here that extend the range of the stave. That's an extreme example. So that's at the very end of the Sultans of Swing. There's another notation which we can use to extend the range a bit. So the dotted line indicates how long it applies, and it means everything here, take it down an octave. So that there is, and I'm nearly off the keyboard, so that bottom note there is this one here, so that's a bottom C. CLEFS, what are CLEFS for? Well, okay, we've got 5 lines and 4 spaces, we can put blobs on it, but there's no indication what a blob here, for example, on the second line. What does that mean? Write G, that means that the second line is G. And that's kind of what we do. The only difference is an old fancy style handwriting capital G with the twirly whirly bit on it ends up looking more like that. But it is actually just a stylized G. And it starts on the second line, and so it labels the second line as being G. We can also do the same down here. So we're going to give that note a meaning, and let's say we're going to call it F. So I can either draw a big F like that, or what's better, well, that's, again, old handwriting way of writing a capital F, and just to emphasize the point, we put 2 dots there, and that means that that is F. So this G here is this G, and this F here is this F here. So now we've unlocked it all. Now the rest of it has meaning. So obviously the next space up means A, the next space down means etc. Okay, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically what it is. Unfortunately, this is the standard, and what it actually means is the second line up in what I'm now going to call the bass clef and the treble clef, that second line up is here, it's a B, but that second line up here is a G. So we're now in the horrible situation that for piano, we've got 2 clefs, meaning that this second line up has different meanings, and all of the other notes on the stave have a different meaning. The trick, though, the way I learnt it was, I learnt the treble clef first, and all I did was simply take it down 2 octaves and then up 2 notes. And I did that translation over and over in my head. So it's just a trick that I had. It's annoying you should have to do a trick at all, but this is the standard. This is what we have. Again, don't worry about it for the tutorials. Every note that I play in the tutorials, I will name it as I play it. So what you see on the paper will simply be a reminder, an aid to figuring out what's going on. So now we're going to look at sharps and flats. Why do we need sharps and flats? Well, the lines and spaces are very good for representing the white keys, but what about the black keys? How do we represent the black keys? So let's have a look at bar 16 of the Sultans, and we can see that's middle C, but it's got this hash symbol in front of it. It's not a hashtag. It's not a substance that's about to become legal in Canada. It simply means raise this to here. So C becomes C sharp. And what I'd also tell you is that sharpness applies to not only that first C, but all of the other Cs in the bar. But then after the bar, it no longer applies. Now, I've added a natural symbol here. Natural means don't sharpen it. It also means don't flatten it. even if I didn't put there, that would be a C natural. So a sharp or a flat applies only for the bar, only lasts as long as the bar that it's in. So yeah, we can sprinkle sharps and flats throughout the piece wherever we like, but sometimes you want sharps and flats to apply by default across the whole piece, in which case you don't want to label every single note as being, for example, a B flat. So that's where we have these things called key signatures. In the case of the Sultans, you'll notice that on the start of every line, B's are flat. Why are we doing that? Well, if you play something in C, you don't need something in C major. You don't need to use any black notes, black keys, which is fine. But if I get tired of playing everything in C, maybe I want to play in F. And we're fine up to here. I'm not too sure about that. I'm happy with the last 4. So what can we do about this? Well, we can flatten it. That's better. So we've now got an F major scale, but B's are flat. Not just this one, but every B is flat. We don't label every B. We label it once per stave. Chords. What are chords? Well, chords are simply where you play lots of keys at the same time. To me, that's the whole point of piano. I remember having piano lessons and being quite frustrated how long it took before the pieces I were given to play were not just single notes in each hand, but actually started to have bigger, meatier chords in them. What I'd say about chords is they're mainly composed of 3 notes, for example. But the interesting thing about that, so that's called a triad. But the interesting thing about triads is I can take this C and I can play it up here instead. So that's also a C major, but it's now in what we call an inversion or first inversion. We can also do the same with this E and take it up the top, and that makes the second inversion. I can also do it again and take this G up, but now I'm back to a root position. And so these chords have different shapes, and let me try and show you on here. So if we look at this chord here, notice how the bottom note is on a space, but the upper 2 are on lines. Notice on this one here, they're all 3 bunched together and they're all spaces. And notice on this one, we've got 2 on lines and the upper one is on a space. So what's happening here? Well, these are different inversions. Now this is a trick you can use to recognize a chord quickly. So if I'm looking at this, I can see, well, it's got that shape about it. It's got that kind of second inversion shape about it. If you look really carefully, look at the space between my fingers. So that is in fact an A major second inversion. So that's that. Then we have, which is an E major root position. And that's a D major first inversion. See, these things are all over the place, they're everywhere. I'm not saying all chords are like that, but you get the idea. There are shapes that you can spot. The other shape which is worth knowing about is octaves. Octaves appear all over the place, especially in the left hand. So here we have a little run of octaves. Okay, so it's a very common pattern. But the thing to notice about octaves is they always come, so they always look about like that. But if the upper note is on a line, the lower one is on a space, and vice versa. So it's a trick for spotting octaves. Okay, so let's summarize pitch. So we have clefs. Clefs lock down the meaning of the lines and the spaces along the stave. It's a real pain that the right hand and the left hand typically use the treble clef and the bass clef, and it means that there's a different naming for example, the second line on the treble clef and the second line on the bass clef. We use sharps and flats to indicate the use of the black keys, and chords come in inversions, and it's worth trying to understand what the shapes of these chords look like. It makes it quicker and easier to read them. And octaves look like that. A space on the bottom, a line on the top, or a line on the bottom and a space on the top. Okay, so that's my introduction to sheet music. I do really hope that it's helpful. Again, I'd like to reiterate, the tutorials are not going to depend on the sheet music, but the sheet music's there. It's worth being able to read it a little bit because it makes good anchorage to the rest of what's being talked about in the tutorial. The other thing is, I think I've explained, I think sheet music's actually pretty poor at representing piano. Certainly when I play something on the piano, it's much simpler in my head. When I see it written down on the page, I think, my goodness me, it looks more complicated than it really is. This is the standard that we have. Sorry, folks, that's what we have to work with. Okay, so that's it. I hope it's helpful, and please remember, the most important thing about music is what it sounds like.